first we're going to thread our needle. So we take our needle threader, take our needle, and we hook the large end through the eye of the needle. The needle will hook on and balance, and we take our thread and put it through the hook, and then pull the needle threader through the eye of the needle. To start, we're going to stitch the letters exactly how we would write them. So the first thing to do is decide your starting point. I'm going to start with this F, so I'm going to start at the beginning of the F, exactly as I would if I would write it. I'm going to go through my jumper from the front to the back and pull that needle all the way through, but leave about 6 inches of yarn on the front side. This is the tail that we're going to weave in later to secure our stitches. Next I'm going to come up at my starting point. So I'm going to bring my needle up through the first point of my letter, and then I'm going to pull that all the way through. To create the first chain, I'm going to turn my work so that I'm stitching away from me. I'm going to hold my working end with my thumb of my left hand. If you're right-handed, this is the way to do it. If you're left-handed, you might need to switch hands. Then I'm going to go down in exactly the same place that I came up in. I'm going to put my hand through the neck of the jumper, and then I'm going to again pull it almost all the way through, but I'm leaving this loop. I'm then going to come up just in front of that first stitch. Ooh. And now I'm going to pull that stitch through, and I'm going to pull that until the loop is snug. And that's our first chain. So then we're going to repeat this. Back down through that original hole, hand through the neck, pull it through, then I'm going to bring my needle back up, make sure that my needle is in the loop, and then pull it tight. Back down through the hole, up just in front. Every time we go down, we're going back into the loop that we originally made. When we're pulling our yarn tight, we're not pulling it too tight. If we do that, the jumper will start to pull underneath and you'll lose the neat lines of the rib. Just snug enough that it's tight around that yarn that came up through the sweater. And I'm just following the line of my pattern that's been drawn on the stick and stitch. Now I've come to an end where there's a sharp corner. If I was to continue stitching this way, this would be a soft corner. If you don't want that to happen, you want a sharp corner, we bring our yarn back down through and we secure our stitch. And then to turn the corner, we're going to come back up inside the stitch we just made. And again, I'm going to twist my work so it's away from me. Find a comfortable way to hold the fabric, and then grab that end with your needle and thumb. I'm going back down again through that same hole. And then back up. Make sure our loop is over our needle, so that as we pull that stitch tight, it's snug on there. If I lay this down for a second, you'll see we have a nice turn on that F. I'm just going to stitch down to the bottom and then we'll tackle this section here. And as we get to the end, we're just thinking about our last stitch and making sure that we're going to finish in the right place. I'm going to do one more. Going to come up right on the end of that line. And then to finish, we're going to catch that end again. So we're going to bring our needle down really close to the side of that stitch. And then we're going to pull it tight. And that is catching down the end of that stitch. So here we have the first part of our F. I want to do this part now, but I don't want to cut my yarn. I'm going to keep it on. So I'm going to turn to the inside of my jumper. And you'll see on the inside we have a lovely neat line of stitches. I'm going to use a technique called whipping to get my needle back to where I need it to be. I'm going to catch underneath my stitches to neatly move the yarn back. We don't want any long sections where we're moving our needle around on the back because they'll get caught by little fingers and will snag the jumper. So we're just catching the white stitches here, trying to avoid the jumper itself, trying to roughly get back to where that cross starts on the F. If you want to see where I am, I'll just stick my needle through for a second and have a look. Oh, just about right. So leaving that there just so I know I'm in the right place. When we want to start a piece of a letter that joins another letter, we want to come up inside of a stitch that we already have. So I'm going to come up inside this stitch here, just there, and this gives a seamless join. Okay, and then I'm going to go down in the same stitch. My bar is a little lower than where I am, but it was right in the middle of two stitches. So I choose the best one. And I'm stitching towards myself here because it just gives me a little bit more visibility. Just do whichever direction feels most comfortable for you. Taking care as I pull that tight because I don't want to snag it. And now just make sure I have enough yarn. Yep. Pack down through that loop there. Take care always to watch that you don't pierce your yarn as you're stitching. That can cause lots of knots and tangles. Each of my stitches is about ½ centimetre away from the one before. Try and keep them even and it gets your letter looking lovely and neat. think one more. Okay. And again, I'm going to secure this end. I'm going to come down really close to that stitch and pull that tight. And that's our first letter done. The F is complete. We need to tidy our ends away now. So to do that, I'm going to work on the inside of the jumper. So we have two ends. I'm going to pull through the other end that we had secured out of the way. To finish our ends, weave our ends in, we're going to do that whipping again. So I'm going to go through 3 stitches, just catching that stitch. And I'm not going to put it too tight, because I don't want to put it tighter on the front, and I don't want to snag the stitch underneath. So just gently pull those through. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to come back through each of those loops and pull my yarn all the way through. That's given me a nice clean finish there, and I can snip my yarn there. Then I'm going to get my needle, get my threader back, because I'm going to thread this end back onto this needle. And again, whip, 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 and then through those 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. That secures it nicely with no big knots, and that's not going to come undone when you wash it. Let's have a look at our jumper and see how we're getting on. So the next thing we need to do is start this eye, and I'm going to start the eye by doing the dot first. And to do the dot to the eye, I'm going to use a stitch called the Lazy Daisy stitch, which is effectively a single chain all on its own. So I'm going to leave enough to make sure that I can wind my ends in. And a good thing to put out here is that when you're deciding how long to leave here, you want at least twice the length of your needle, because that gives you enough length of yarn to be able to work it back in on the other side. So my dot is here. I'm going to come up at the base of that dot, directly above where the eye is, and then I'm going to come back down through the same spot. Okay, I'm just going to move that so you can see a little more clearly. And then I'm going to come back up at the top of my dot. Now you might want to pop these at a slight angle. I like to have them so they're like little teardrops that flick off. And then you're going to pull this tight. And then I'm going to stitch that down exactly like I ended the rows before. Okay. Now you can see you've got a nice neat eye there. It's a little bit loose. What you can do is just put on this end here. Maybe pull around there a you can tweak your stitches to fit them how you like them. There we go. And we never want to pull anything too tight. This little drop here isn't too far to start our next stitch. So what I might do though is just tack it under slightly because I don't want it to be too loose. So to do that, I can use these stitches here. If I just catch under these, you won't see it on the front. It'll just help us get down to the next part without having our yarn showing. And we don't want any yarn that's flapping around underneath. Okay, so just like we did with the F, I'm going to start with the I and come up and stitch down. I'm going to pause now on this letter because I want to join my I to my F. And I want it to look seamless, as if my pen had flowed. So I'm going to pause, I'm going to take the yarn off my needle, I'm going to leave that to one side. I'm going to start my next letter now, for the small F. We're coming up to an interesting bit here where our line crosses over another line. We don't have to stop and start, we don't have to do anything special. All we're going to do is carefully stitch over and cross our lines exactly how your pen would cross over if you were drawing this letter by hand. Just going to take care with our stitch placement to make sure that we don't snag anything and that we don't come up halfway through the yarn. So with this one I'm going to do one more before I go through. And then I'm going to go carefully back down. And then the next one I'm going to come up inside this stitch here. You can see this is crossing over nice and flat and neatly, and we're not distorting the line underneath at all. If you start coming up through this yarn, then it starts to push these wider and it makes this line look distorted. So we're going to go through neatly. And again, I'm just going to continue with this until we get close to this next I, and then stop, leaving a long tail. Okay, I'm going to stop there on this one again. I'm going to take my needle off. And we need to do two things now to finish our F. We need to come back and cross our F in a second, but I'm going to deal with this tail first because I'd like to get it out of the way. I like to work with as little tails as possible, less to get tangled up. So I'm going to rethread my needle with this. Okay. So I'm going to turn my work till it's comfortable for me to work with. I like it here. I can do a few more stitches to carry on this line. Maybe just one more. And then my last stitch is going to join the two lines together. Okay. Now I want to think about where I want to go. So I'm going to create a loop going through these stitches. So I'm going to come under one stitch, back through under the next stitch, and then come back down through my chain. So I want to use my yarn to work out which two is going to look best in. If I was to come through here, it's going to pull my yarn down. If I was to go through up here, it's going to go too high. So we can see quite clearly our next stitch would come through, and it's lovely over this join. So I'm going to take the back of my needle. I use the back because it's not sharp, so we're not going to snag anything. And I'm going to push it under these two stitches. So pull it all the way through. And then I'm going to go back through the next stitch. So it's just underneath both of the sections of the stitch, and then pull it through. And then the last thing to finish that part is we're going to come back down through our chain. Don't put it too tight, and you can see that that I is now beautifully joined with that F. I have quite a lot of yarn left on here, so I'm going to turn this inside out. I'm going to bring this up to the top, and I'm going to stitch across here. Okay, and I want to work out to this part, so I'm going to just weave out 1, 2, 3 ribs. So let's go one through there, one through there. Again, I'm really not pulling these tight, I'm just catching the yarn, just so that we don't have anything that little fingers could go underneath. Let's go through there and see how we are. So we just need to come up a touch. I can do that from this side now. So we're going to come up here. We should have just enough. If you ever want to work out if you have enough yarn, you want enough to do 4 times. So we should have the perfect amount. So every time you stitch, you're using 4 times the amount of yarn for the distance you move. Roughly. And we're going to finish this row again here. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to come down real close to that stitch there. Pull that through. And that's finished that cross of the F. Let's turn it over. And we're going to weave in our end again. So we're going to whip 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and then come back through each of those moves. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just catching that yarn at the top so that we can pull that through and have a nice neat finish. Let's have a look at where we've got to. So we've got our tail of the dot of our eye to weave in a bit. We've got this tail, which we will do in a second, and this tail is the beginning of our F. We'll do some weaving in at the end to get rid of those. So now we can do this eye, and we're nearly finished. Okay, so again, to dot my eye, I'm going to use the Lazy Daisy stitch. I'm going to come down anywhere around here. Let's just move this collar out of the way. Come back up where I want my stitch to start. Leave myself a tail so that I can weave in later. Go back down where we came up. I'm going to come up around there, at roughly the same angle as my other dot. The lovely thing about Lazy Daisy stitches is once you've conquered it, you can do them slightly longer, and they make the perfect petals for daisies and other flowers. So you can do clusters around a circle and that will make you a daisy. You could do little groups of them on a stem to make other little flowers. You can play with them and do all sorts with those. So let's just bring that down so that we can get to our start of our eye. So let's come down here. I'm going to catch that, I'm going to catch that, and I'm going to catch that. Very gently pull that through. Okay. I'm going to switch hands and I'm going to stitch this eye with my left hand. So I'm going to hold the fabric with my right hand and I'm going to stitch with my left hand, just in case there's anybody that wants to know how to do this that's left-handed. I'm very lucky that I am left-handed, that I can stitch with either hand. It's exactly the same. We're just going to hold our yarn away, come down and come back up. I am a little slower this way around. Looking a bit tangled here, so let's work out what's going on. It's just that was in our way. Okay. That's our beginning bit that's just in the way there. And then the needle back down. Pull that tight. Sometimes it's nice just to tweak your stitches a little. And we're going to weave that end in, so I'm going to bring my jumper over. This end is finished now, so I'll go 1, 2, 3, and then back through my whips I just did. And then we'll snip this off, put that to one side. Now we're going to join our F to our I. So looking at this, we're going to need one more stitch and then we're going to join. So let's do the one stitch first. I'm going to spin it around. Maybe 2, we'll see. Oh no, I think 1 will do. And again, I'm going to look where I want my yarn to go. If I went through this one to come back through that one, we're going to be too high. You can see again, we're naturally going to go through this stitch here. So again, take the back of my needle through, and the needle again through the stitch above, and then back down through and pull it tight. And that's my F and my I joined together. So let's tie this end off. And I'm going to just gently pull through these ends, ready to tie these off in a second. So we've got 3 ends to tie off. Finished. One beautiful name jumper for Fifi. And the last step is to get rid of our stick and stitch paper. So we just submerge it into some water. Make sure it's all off. And then pop it in the wash.